Well, it's been a while since we've done a platform video, and my buddy Steven Crowder expressed an interest a couple of weeks ago in learning more about how the Prowler works. I said, Steven, it's not complicated. He said, but it can be done wrong. So why don't you tell us how to do it right? So I said, well, that's a good idea. So here we are. We're going to talk about the Prowler. Now, I realize that we've got a couple of extremely good articles on the website about how the Prowler is programmed. But what I thought we'd talk about today is how to operate the damn thing. And a little bit about the little subtle nuances that go along with operating the Prowler. Now, this Prowler is the one we use here in Wichita Falls Athletic Club. This is an indoor Prowler, and it is markedly different from what a more traditional outdoor Prowler looks like. This is the e-Prowler version from Elite Fitness, and you'll notice that it is a triangular configuration. There's one forward foot, one forward skid, and two back skids. And the thing these two have in common are the upright poles that you actually push against. This Prowler has got a set of either loading handles or low handles to push on. As far as I'm concerned, these are relatively useless because that is an awfully low position to push in, and we're going to talk in a minute about why that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. This one is the one we use inside. We find that an all-weather configuration is much easier to use and allows us access to Prowler work even when it's raining outside or snow on the ground or lightning or thunder or protests or whatever happening in the street. This thing allows us access to our 60-meter AstroTurf track that we've built here right in the middle of the club. The total distance down and back is 60 meters, and this is adequate for most purposes. We've got some people that push half of it in one push, one rep, as it would be called, and other people go down and back and call that one rep for a full 60 meters. Now, the Prowler has been around a long time, and it was, you know, it's a better version of what would be considered just a standard weight sled that you pull. The thing about the Prowler is that you push the Prowler, and the different way that the pushed Prowler engages with your kinetic chain is what makes it so valuable. It is an excellent way to condition the entire body. And in keeping with our motto of more muscle mass used over the longest effective range of motion that would allow you to use the most weight and thus get stronger, we're going to adapt our little motto into a conditioning paradigm as well. The thing about the Prowler is, and the thing that most people do not really understand about the Prowler, is that the Prowler is not trained in the sense that the squat or the deadlift or the press is trained. In other words, your deadlift can get stronger for years, for many, many years, 10, 15, maybe 20 years, the length of a competitive powerlifting career. Your deadlift can therefore be trained for increased weight over a very long period of time. The Prowler is not that way. The Prowler peaks out relatively quickly, about like an exercise does, like an assistance exercise. And after that, you just do the Prowler to maintain conditioning. The wonderful thing about the Prowler is that it is loadable incrementally, quite a bit like a barbell is. In other words, the load on the Prowler can vary with respect to the training effect you are trying to obtain from the work. You can Take this thing outside and leave it empty and push it all the way around the block for 15 minutes and obtain a training effect in what would be the aerobic range of bioenergetics. Or you can load it up to 150 kilos and push it for 10 steps and obtain a training effect that would be solidly within the ATP PC end of the bioenergetic spectrum. So the effect will vary depending on the load on the Prowler. And another interesting thing about the Prowler is that the relationship between the load and the floor, the surface on which the Prowler is being pushed, is extremely important and is why you don't see any Prowler contests because, for instance, there are no Prowler records nationwide. The reason for this is that the Prowler interacts with the surface upon which it is sliding. Prowlers operate on skids. This one has skids, that one has skids. Friction is the resistance. The more weight on the Prowler, the greater the amount of friction. But the coefficient of friction between the skid and the surface on which it is sliding is extremely variable to the point that 90 kilos on this AstroTurf and 90 kilos on the pavement outside are completely different experiences in terms of the ease with which you can push the Prowler. And what's even more interesting is that when you get outside, you have variations in temperature and relative humidity that change the same surface. And the same surface over which the Prowler is slid multiple times will decrease in friction as it polishes, so that the 10th rep across the same surface will not be like the first rep across the same surface. These effects make the Prowler extremely difficult to quantify. So every time you use the Prowler, essentially what you're doing is adding weight, titrating the thing up to the load that you want to work with today. And typically what we do with the Prowler is push it 4 or 5 reps, and that should be enough. And instead of getting into the programming today, I'll just refer you to the articles on our website, startingstrength.com, and let you read about the different ways in which the Prowler can be used in terms of programming it for your conditioning training. Now, what we're going to talk about today is the best way to push the Prowler. And there are several different opinions on this, and you may listen to my arguments today and completely reject them. I don't care. But I think that if you'll think about what I'm telling you to do, it'll make more sense to do it the way I recommend than just to look at a picture and then just push the Prowler down the street. All right, we're here with our friend Chase Lindley. Chase is a big, strong kid, and he's obviously capable of pushing a lot of weight on the Prowler. And again, we're not going to get into loads and reps and programming and stuff today. We're just going to look at the method by which the Prowler is pushed. Now, this is the way it's usually illustrated. And I'm going to let Chase just push this thing, and we're going to follow him down. And I want you to note the position of his back angle and the position of his arms. He's got the thing out in front of him. His face is down. His back is essentially parallel to the floor, and he's pushing the thing on his toes. In contrast, the way I'm going to recommend today that you push the Prowler is like this. Note that Chase's back angle is much more vertical. His elbows are in the vicinity of or resting on his rib cage. He's pushing it on his heels from an initial heel strike with a long stride facing forward. Now let's examine the difference between these two positions. Okay, show us the first one again, Chase. Note that when Chase is lined up like this, The force that he's applying to these poles is essentially moment force going down into the rigid frame of the Prowler. This is converted to movement down the track, and in this position, you have a compressive force coming from his hands back down his spine to his flexed hips. In contrast, look at the position now. His back angle is more vertical. The compressive force comes down the forearm and intersects with his torso as his elbows are braced against his rib cage here. When he pushes the Prowler in this configuration, what holds the back at this angle? Abs, trunk musculature, hip extensors. All of these now have a different job to do, a much more important job to do than they did when he was parallel to the floor and the compression was being channeled straight down his spine without this angle to maintain. In other words, this is harder. This involves more muscle mass. This is a much bigger insult to the body to do it this way. In addition, we want to be safe when we do the Prowler. And in my opinion, if you push the Prowler on your toes, you are asking for an Achilles tendon injury. Having had one myself, you don't want that. Okay? So what I'm going to suggest you do is push it like this. Long strides. Initial heel strike. Elbows on your rib cage, chest is up, you look forward, take a long stride. I think you'll find that this is harder. It's harder to walk it than it is to run with it or try to sprint with it because of the fact that the faster this thing moves down either surface, outside or in here, the less friction being applied to the skids by the surface. Moving it faster, the easier it'll slide. Moving it slower, the harder it'll slide. We're not trying to make the Prowler easy, okay? Walk the Prowler. Walk it with an initial heel strike. Walk it facing forward. Walk it with your chest up and your elbows on your rib cage, and you'll find that it's a little bit different experience than the typical way everybody does it. As far as the weights are concerned for the Prowler, what you're going to do is start with a light weight, get your ankles, connective tissues warm, and titrate the thing up to the training effect you want that day. And again, we're not going to go into the programming, just refer to the extensive articles we've got on the website about this. Well, I hope that clears up some of the confusion about why I think the best way to do the Prowler is with a more vertical back angle, and with your elbows down here against your sides. Take that for what it's worth and have fun incorporating the Prowler into your conditioning training.